Hi guys, Metal Maniac back again, and in this video, I'm going to be listing off, in my opinion, the top 10 most underrated metal albums. So let's begin. At number 10 is the album A Time of Changes by Blitzkrieg. Yeah, not only this album, but the band as a whole, like their entire discography is very underrated. Yeah, I mean, this album is just really, really good. Um, yeah, for the most part, the first half is better than the second half, but overall, it's still a really good album. Um, I'd say like the best stuff is definitely Ragnarok / Inferno, Blitzkrieg, Pull the Trigger, Armageddon, and Hell to Pay. But I don't know, it just this band and this album and then the band as a whole is just very looked over and just almost like people don't really realize they exist for some bizarre reason. Um, but yeah, just a really awesome album. Definitely gives off the feel of mid '80s. Yeah, just a really good album overall. Let's see. At number 9, is Show No Mercy by Slayer. Yeah, I mean, technically, it's not that underrated, but I mean, it is somewhat overlooked, especially diehard fans of Slayer who mostly just stick to their albums that have their quote unquote signature sound. Like starting with what did it start with again? Oh yeah, it started with Hell Awaits all the way to their last album. But and honestly, this and like 2 other releases are pretty underrated. This one, the Haunting the Chapel EP, and the live album Live Undead. But this is definitely the most underrated. It's just very underrated. I mean, it's not technically that underrated again, but it is very looked over because I don't know. I guess people are stubborn. A lot of people only like their stuff with the signature sound and just dismiss this just because it sounds different. But I like it. I mean, that's the reason why this is my favorite Slayer album too, because it is different than most of their other stuff. But yeah, it's just this is a thing that shouldn't be looked over, that shouldn't be glossed over, because it is really, really, really good. But yeah, that's at number 9. At number 8 is the album Fear of the Dark by Iron Maiden. Yeah, I was actually surprised to find out that this is extremely, extremely overlooked. For some bizarre reason. Again, with like about everything on this list, for the most part, I don't understand why people just gloss over these albums. Yeah, Fear of the Dark, an amazing album. There's only really a few songs on this album that I don't like. Let's see. The only songs on here that I don't like are Afraid to Shoot Strangers, Childhood's End, Wasting Love, The Fugitive, The Apparition, and Weekend Warrior. But everything else is amazing. I'd say probably my top 3 would probably be Quick or Be Dead, From Here to Eternity, and of course, Fear of the Dark, the title track. But yeah, a really good album, overlooked. I guess it's overlooked because it's a 90s heavy metal album. I don't know. But yeah, number 8. Wait. Yeah, it's at number 8. Alright. At number 7 is Spiritual Healing by Death. Definitely a lot of people's least favorite of Death's discography. But it is really good. just not as good as some of the others. But I mean, it is its own thing. It's still really good. There's only like what, 2 or 3 songs on this album that I don't think are that good. Those being "Altering the Future" and "Genetic Reconstruction." Yeah, only 2 songs that aren't that good, but everything else is really good. Um, but yeah, really awesome death metal album. And actually, it's the last traditional death metal album in Death's discography, because they would go a lot more experimental, melodic, and progressive as time would go on, and also move away from the horror movie-esque lyrics. I mean, yeah, there's very little on this one. There's still, I mean, yeah, this is more of the a lot of the real world issues, the horrors of the real world. But I mean, there's still slight elements of the horror movie stuff in here. Not much, but a few elements here and there. But they would completely go away from that with the album Human and everything else after that. But yeah, awesome album. Definitely recommended if you still want the early Death sound, but are looking for something that's maybe a little bit different from their first 2 albums. Alright, next. I'm gonna do this. I'm just gonna set this. I'm gonna set this over here. There we go. Alright, at number 6 is the album Helldorado by Wasp. Yeah, definitely a lot of people's least favorite. I I honestly don't understand that, especially with this one, considering that people praise their first album, and as they should, because their first album's amazing. But people hate on this album, which again doesn't make sense because this is the closest of closest. This album is the closest of style and sound to their first album. Like this is, like I've said before, this sounds like a natural continuation of their first album, and that's why I love it so much. And it even cranks the what was good. I mean, it takes what was good about their first album and just intensifies it. Um, but yeah, it's just a really, really good album. Um, Definitely something that I guess took people off, like had people off guard. Considering what they put out, what a bunch of albums they put out before this was completely different from their first album. So I guess people were just kind of off put at all of a sudden. Oh wait, there's something like their first album. First album. But yeah, it's still really, really good. Definitely worth checking out if you want to get into Wasp. Um, yeah, this along with their first album. But yeah, that's at number 6. At number, come on, yeah, okay. At number 5 is the album Fistful of Metal by Anthrax. I do know why people look over this one, and it's a very stupid reason. Just like with another album I'll get to shortly. But people look over Fistful of Metal just because it has Neil Turbin on vocals instead of, I think the other guy's name is Paul Bostaff. I know I might be wrong. I'm sorry if I am. I have never listened to any other Anthrax album other than this. Mainly because I have just started to get into Anthrax. So excuse me if I don't know everything. But I do know that this is definitely something a lot of people don't like, this particular album, because it's not it's not the other guy singing. And Neil Turbin only lasted 1 album, unfortunately, because I would have, like, I don't know, I just would think it would be very interesting to hear him on maybe a few more Anthrax albums. I don't know if Neil Turbin did anything else after this, but from what I hear on this album, he sounds amazing. Definitely definitely very Rob Halford inspired. Um, but yeah, it's just a really good album. Again, there's only one, two, three. There's only three songs on here that I don't think are that good. But everything else is amazing. Probably my top three on this one would definitely be Death Rider, um, Death from Above, and Howling Furies. Just an all-out headbanging classic, in my opinion. But yeah, awesome album. Very underrated. Um, at number 4 is the album Rock You to Hell by Grim Reaper. This is a band that is just kind of like with Blitzkrieg is as band as a whole is kind of forgotten about for but unlike Blitzkrieg, I do actually know why this band is forgotten about pretty much. Considering that I guess their label that they were under back in the day, Ebony Records, screwed them out of their money, and basically there's a whole catastrophe with them trying to leave Ebony Records, but Ebony being so petty that this band was leaving, that they basically pulled some strings in order to make it so they basically no other record company would allow Grim Reaper to go to them to make a deal so they could record more albums. But besides the fact that they haven't made they have made at least 2 albums recently, but besides the fact that they weren't making albums for quite some time, um, they're still a really really good band, especially their first album and this album. Um, but everyone talks about their first album and their second album, but a lot of people kind of overlook their third album. Um, I don't know. I just think this is the better of their first 3 albums. Definitely has better production. Definitely, you could hear everyone in the band has perfected what they do, and they just sound at the top of their game. And the songs are just great on here. I mean, yeah, there's no song on here like "See You in Hell" from their first album, but there's still some amazing songs like "Rock You to Hell," the title track, "Night of the Vampire," "When Heaven Comes Down," "Rock Me Till I Die," "Wasted Love," and "I Want More." Yeah, so overall, just a great album. One of the very few great heavy metal albums from the late 80s. Yeah, glam metal was really taking over at that point, but definitely one of the very last few great heavy metal albums from that time period. Um, but yeah, awesome album, very underrated. Alright, number 3. Number 3 is the album From Beyond by Massacre. Um, yeah, in my opinion, Massacre hasn't made a good album since this one, but this is definitely something that is a must listen for anyone who's a fan of old school death metal. I mean, it has the best of both worlds in terms of it's a combination of old school death metal, like raw sounding old school death metal, while also having um, old school death metal that's somewhat actually pretty technical. So it definitely has the best of both sounds combined. Um, and Ken Lee is a very underrated death metal vocalist, and Rick Ross just goes ham on the guitar and the whammy bar and stuff. And Bill Andrews does a fantastic job on the drums, and the bass is actually somewhat audible on this album. But yeah, it's just awesome. Um, I'd say the best songs on here are my 3 favorites. Definitely are uh, Cryptic Realms, Defeat Remains, and Warhead, which is a cover of a Venom song. I believe like at least one or two more bands covered that song, but I don't remember which bands they were. But yeah, Warhead's, even though Warhead's a cover song. Speaking of Warhead being a cover song, though, in my opinion, this cover version of Warhead is way, way better than the original version by Venom. Like, just way better in my opinion. But that's just my opinion. Anyway, but yeah, overall, a very, very underrated death metal classic. But yeah, this is one I suggest you check out if you're a fan of old school death metal. All right, number two. Number two is the Death Album 3 by Dethklok. Yeah, I mean, you could kind of say it's not underrated, but people who usually say it's not underrated are either one of two people. Either you're someone who thinks that just because Dethklok is a fictional band, they don't count, or you're the type of person who's just like, or you're like a huge fan of Dethklok, so you just think so you're a huge fan of Dethklok and Metalocalypse to the point where you just think, oh, how can this ever be underrated? Which, I mean, I get that. Being a fan of Metalocalypse and Dethklok myself, I at one point thought that until I've kind of stepped back and I'm like, wait, until I thought, wait, that's people usually say that are just fans of the show and the band. But, I mean, that's usually how it goes. But anyway, yeah, I mean, this is definitely extremely underrated in terms of, like, people accepting it as a legit death metal album. Again, yeah, I mean, it's not from, like, an actual band. It's from a band from a TV show, a fake band from a TV show. But, still, it's very good. It's very, like, people praise the first album. Some people praise the second album, but I don't know. This is just definitely the best, and in my opinion, the best thing that ever came out of the 2010s. In terms of a metal album. Um, but yeah, I just really love this album. Definitely has a really great atmosphere, really good songwriting, and really good playing in terms of all the instruments. I mean, they got Gene Hoglan. Gene Hoglan's on drums. How can you get better than having Gene Hoglan on drums? I mean, yeah, it's just an amazing, amazing album, and definitely something to check out if you've never listened to it before. But yeah. And finally, at number one, in my opinion, the most underrated metal album is, of course, Jugulator by Judas Priest. Yeah, I mean, I really do wish. I really wish that people would stop, like, being so biased as to say, oh, the Ripper Owens era isn't good because it's not Rob Halford. I mean, you could have good sounding, like, really epic and just awesome sounding Judas Priest without having Rob Halford. It's difficult, but I mean, it's. I mean, you could pull it off. I mean, the Ripper Owens era proved you could pull it off. You could pull off badass Judas Priest without Rob Halford. Uh, but yeah, I mean, that kind of sound. I know that's probably very blasphemous to fans of Judas Priest, but I mean, it's true. I mean, you don't. Yeah, Rob Halford is awesome. Yeah, he's the metal god. He's the metal god. He's the voice of metal. But to say that no other person could do as good as to do as good as job or even better than Rob Halford is very, very, very biased in my opinion, and you can't really see the bigger picture of. I mean, bands change singers all the time, and to say that only one singer fits that band. I mean, yeah, there's the occasion where that is the case, but for the most part, you could swap out singers, and as long as you have a very good replacement, it will work. And I mean, there are times a lot of times where I do prefer Ripper Owens over Rob Halford, believe it or not. I mean, I do think in some ways Ripper Owens is better than Rob Halford in terms of vocals. But yeah, I just love this album. Definitely extremely underrated. I really hope sometime in the future they will re-release not only this album but every single Ripper Owens release of Judas Priest. Um, I am still planning to get the only Ripper Owens release I don't own yet is Live in London, which I have heard is actually pretty good, and I've heard there's a DVD to that one apparently. I'm just I really want to get that one. But yeah, just an not overrated, underrated. It's an underrated album, and in my opinion, it's an absolute masterpiece. I mean, you got some really, really, really kick-ass songs. The title track, Jugulator, Bloodstained, Dead Meat, Death Row, Burn in Hell, which I believe was the single, um, Abductors. Even for fans of this album, that track is extremely underrated and underappreciated. Bullet Train, which I think it was the second single, and then the epic ending track, Cathedral Spires. Yeah, awesome, awesome album. Alright, so that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you next time.